The moment that the man stepped out of the pickup and left the cool comfort of the air conditioning, the humidity-infused heat of the day hit him like a brick wall. That heat was quickly followed by a swarm of flies. It was a combination that he was more than familiar with. He had been coming to this part of the swamp for decades. He ignored the discomfort and got his tackle box and fishing rod out of the bed of the truck. The walk from the dirt road through the swamp was slow. The overgrowth was heavy, and although there was a thin path here, nature had reclaimed it. He forced his way through the brush as he walked towards his destination. After a few minutes, he passed an old rotted tree. No leaves adorned its branches, and its bark had long ago turned black. The branches were stretched out as if reaching towards the man. He kept going. This dead relic of another time marked the end of the first stretch of his trek. Both the air and the clouds of insects grew denser as he carefully passed through a shoulder-high group of brown, brittle grasses. His boots sank further down here as the ground changed from dry turf to thick mud. He made sure of every step before taking it. He knew that there were deep sinkholes hidden in the grass, and one wrong step would cause him to be pulled under. There would be no coming back from that. It was slow going, but he made it to the other side and continued on. The last part of the man's walk took him through bushes wrapped in thick thorns. He squeezed past them with great care, but it was impossible to make it through them unscathed. Thorns tore at his clothing and skin. When he made it to the other side, he was covered in bleeding scrapes and scratches. He was standing in front of a large lake. The water appeared almost black, and the surface was still. The smell of rot and stagnation hung in the air. Dead plants and trees rose out of it. The man's skin crawled as he watched it. After a long moment, he set down his fishing rod and tackle box. Opening the box, he carefully took out a hook. He looped the rod's line through the narrow hole at the top of the hook and expertly tied a knot to secure it. With that done, he returned to the box and removed a small bottle filled with live worms. He baited the hook. Nodding once to himself, the man raised the fishing rod and cast out the line. The baited hook arced gracefully outward before plunging beneath the lake's surface with a barely audible plunk. He carefully sat down on the uncomfortable ground and leaned up against a rock to wait. It didn't take long to get a bite. The tug on the line was slight, almost imperceptible. The man held the reel in place for a few moments and waited. Fishing was more an art than a science to him, and he always knew in his gut what to do. At just the exact right time, he began to turn the reel while also pulling the rod back. Less than a minute later, his catch was flopping on the ground. The fish, if it could be called that, was small, barely the length of the man's hand. Its scales were bloated and puffy like infected wounds, and one eye was missing from the socket. Its mouth opened and closed, revealing flat, squared teeth instead of pointed ones. The animal was disgusting and strange. Unnatural. Not wanting to touch it with his bare hands, he took out a pair of gloves from the tackle box and put them on before getting out a hammer. Without hesitation, he brought the hammer down hard on the fish's head. The animal instantly went still. Grimacing, the man took the hook out of the fish's mouth and pierced it through the skin just above the tail. Making sure that it was secure, he stood back up and cast the line back out into the lake and watched as his new bait went under the water. He sat back down. Bigger fish required bigger bait. This was one of the most basic tenets of fishing. In this case, bigger fish required stranger bait. He knew that this time it would take longer to get a bite. There would be less larger fish than smaller ones. That was the only way that an ecosystem like this could work. If there were more larger ones, they'd run out of prey and die off. That was how nature worked. The man adjusted slightly against the rock. He wasn't sure that nature was how he would describe this lake, but the point still stood. Bracing the pole with his legs, he dug out a can of insect repellent from the tackle box and applied a fresh coat of it over his body. The swarms of flies, mosquitoes, and other insects that had no names were getting more aggressive. His scrapes from the thorns were attracting them. The repellent only did so much. The man dropped the can back into the tackle box as there was a tug at the pole. He wrapped his hands around it tightly and waited. There was definitely something on the line. Like the first fish, though, he was going to fight it as little as possible. He would let it wear itself out a bit before reeling it in. He braced both his feet and pushed his body back against the rock. The line continued to bounce as the animal on the other end tried to free itself. This catch was definitely larger than the last one. He gritted his teeth and waited for his chance. When the poling became gentler, he began to reel in the catch. It immediately started fighting, but it quickly slowed back down as he was able to steadily bring it closer to shore. It had expended too much energy and was now unable to resist. It took less than a minute for the catch to be pulled out of the water. This fish, if it could be called that, was twice the size of the first. It was more rounded as well, with sickly brown scales and a dozen eyes rapidly rotating in their sockets across its body. Small translucent appendages, vaguely shaped like tentacles, writhed on its underside. It had a row of 3 mouths, all of which had thin tongues sticking out of them. The man made sure not to touch the fish, even with the gloves on his hands. Instead, he lowered the line until the creature was lying on its side on the ground. He raised the hammer up and brought it down hard on the animal. There was a dull thud, but it kept moving. He struck it again, and then again. After the 4th attempt, it finally fell still. It was time to change things. The man took a new reel with a different line out of the tackle box. He quickly replaced the one that he had been previously using and nodded to himself in satisfaction before attaching a heavier hook to the line. He didn't use this equipment often, only on the rare occasion that he went fishing for swordfish. There was, of course, no swordfish in the lake. There was something large hiding in it, however, and he hoped that this would allow him to catch it. Holding his breath, he attached the horrible fish to the hook and cast it out into the water. Being that close to it made him queasy. He managed to stop himself from throwing up. He didn't sit down. He knew that there would be a longer wait, probably much longer than his first 2 catches, but that didn't matter to him. If he was right, this would be the catch that he had been waiting for. The one that he had been obsessing over. When he had first discovered this lake, the man had thought that he had discovered a hidden gem. He thought that he had found an isolated fishing spot that no one else knew about. Back then it hadn't been like it was now. The water had been crystal clear, with vivid and vibrant nature surrounding it. It had been beautiful. So beautiful, in fact, that he had decided to bring his daughter along with him. She had been begging for him to teach her how to fish almost since she learned how to talk. He had mostly fished from boats in those days, and his wife had been worried that it was too dangerous for a child so young. She was, after all, only 6, and the ocean was unpredictable at the best of times. The lake was perfect, though. There was no need to be on a boat, and they could take their time while he taught her. He remembered the smile on his wife's face as she had finally agreed. as well as the squeal of joy from his daughter as she got her wish. He had purchased a tackle box and rod just for her, not one of those cheap kid sets that could be purchased at a big box store, but a real one for someone her size. After all, he had told her, if they were going to do it, they were going to do it right. They had left home early in the morning. They had walked together past the old tree. It had stood straight and tall. He had carried her through the muddy field, not because of the sinkholes that weren't there, but because she didn't want to get her new boots muddy. They had passed through the thornless bushes with ease. They had hugged when she saw the pristine lake and thanked him once again for allowing her to come. The man hadn't done any fishing that day. Instead, he had helped teach his daughter everything. How to feed the line out of the reel and up to the rod. How to tie a hook at the end of it and bait that hook. How to pull her arm back and snap it forward to cast the hook into the water. How to take that hook out of the very normal fish's mouths and throw them back into the water. It had been a perfect day. The man's heart had been full. As the sun had just been starting to set, his daughter had asked to be allowed to try to catch just one more fish before they left. The man had looked at her excited face and smiled. There was no harm in it. Of course she could. With a determined look, she had insisted that she didn't need his help and cast the line out herself. Everything was so clear in the man's mind. He could see the glint of light on the hook as it arced out over the lake. It descended towards a spot that they hadn't fished yet, a small patch covered in algae. It broke the surface of the water and struck something. The rest was a blur. The creature had risen out of the lake with great speed. It was such a twisted and unholy thing that his mind hadn't been able to fully comprehend what he was seeing. His daughter had screamed, the shrill sound piercing through the clearing and ringing in his ears. Before he could react, before anyone could have possibly done anything, the beast had dragged his daughter into the lake. He had tried to get to her. He had dove into the cold water in a desperate attempt to save her. The monster had somehow completely disappeared. The water began to turn the color of bile. New fish that he had never seen before, a wide variety of unnatural nightmares, rushed at him and bit into his flesh. He only barely managed to escape onto shore. The wounds would heal, but his body would be covered in jagged scars. No one had believed the man's account of what had happened. The authorities believed that he must have done something to his daughter and hidden the evidence. Worse, as time passed and more accusations were made, he had seen his wife come to believe that as well. With no proof, there were never any charges filed. It didn't matter. He was already branded as a child murderer and had lost both of the two people in the world that he loved. Each time that the man returned to the lake to search for his daughter in hopes of recovering her remains so that he could lay them to rest, he had found it and the surrounding wilderness to have grown darker and stranger. He lost count of how many times he had gone there, but eventually it had become the isolated, alien place that it was now. The man had given up on ever finding his daughter's remains. It had taken a lot of time, but he had finally come to grips with the reality that she was completely gone. With that realization had come anger, and from that anger had sprung the burning need for vengeance. The man tightened his grip on the fishing rod. Hours went by, but still he stood there and silently watched the water. He wasn't leaving until he had what he came for. He was only human, though, and after a long time had passed, his legs began to hurt. Deciding to take a moment to recover his strength, he sat down in the dirt and stretched out. He didn't know what it was that had claimed his daughter, but he had come ready for it. Reaching into the tackle box, he moved things out of the way until his fingers touched cold metal. He wrapped his hand around the handle of the heavy gun before taking it out of the box and setting it down on the ground next to him. A ripple spread across the lake from around his fishing line. The man hadn't moved the line. Something else had created the ripple. He stood back up and carefully slid the gun into his belt. He was ready for whatever happened. Without warning, the water erupted upward in a great geyser, and the creature that had haunted the man's dreams ever since it had taken away his life rose out of the lake. In an instant, he knew that he was not ready for it. No amount of preparation would have gotten him ready. He hadn't gotten a good look at the monster all those years ago. The attack had happened so fast, and his attention had been split between it and his daughter. Now, though, he saw it fully, and his mind recoiled away from the sight. The man tried to turn away. He was frozen in place. In the space of mere seconds, his mind began to peel. He could feel pieces of it being stripped away by this creature that he couldn't focus his eyes on. There were only vague impressions. A smooth body, rows of teeth running vertically along its sickly skin, a gaping open mouth filled with a darkness that moved and churned into an impossibly black void. Sanity was being pulled from him as if a great vacuum was sucking it inside. The man began to laugh. He wasn't consciously aware that he was doing so. Strips of his mind began to tangle together and tear free more rapidly. He fell to his knees and felt his head lull to one side. His neck could no longer support it. He didn't have the will to even try. As the monster's gaping maw closed around him, the man tried to remember what had brought him to the lake in the first place.